Alexander Hunt stood outside a crumbling apartment building at 11:47 p.m., watching a woman he'd followed for 8 months. Through the window, Elizabeth Bennett served dinner to her family. 3 mismatched plates, food stretched thin. Barely enough for tomorrow. She didn't know the man outside held a folder with her face in it. She didn't know he'd been tracking her every move. She didn't know the truth that was about to destroy her entire life. Alexander's hands trembled as he compared the photograph he'd carried for 15 years. His missing sister Emily at 17, to the waitress laughing inside. Same smile, same tilt of her head. But Elizabeth Bennett believed she was someone else entirely. What he found that night didn't just freeze him. It proved Elizabeth's whole life was a lie, and the person who stole it was sitting right beside her at that table. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My grandmother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these stories matter by hitting that subscribe button. Subscribe to Letters of the Heart. And let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now let's continue. The phone vibrated against the bare floor at 5:42 a.m., rattling like an angry insect beside Elizabeth Bennett's mattress. She silenced it before the second buzz, her hand moving automatically in the dark. Across the studio apartment, Marcus's breathing stayed steady on the couch, deep, the sleep of a 20-year-old who still believed tomorrow might be better. Behind the hanging sheet that separated the third corner, Linda's breathing came raspy and uneven, the kind that never quite recovered after chemo. Elizabeth sat up slowly, joints protesting. 28 years old, but her body felt twice that. The uniform hung on the bathroom door, black pants, white button-down shirt with the mended collar she'd stitched 3 times now. Third, washed this week. The fabric was thinning near the elbows, but new uniforms cost $47 she didn't have. She dressed in silence, movements practiced after 6 years of the same routine. In the kitchenette, she made coffee. Instant, cheap, the kind that tasted like burned rubber no matter how much sugar you added. 1 spoonful of grounds instead of 2. It stretched farther that way. The electric kettle wheezed as it heated, threatening to die like everything else in this apartment. On the refrigerator, held by a single magnet, Marcus's community college acceptance letter caught the dim overhead light. Congratulations on your acceptance to Richard J. Daley College. She'd read it so many times she'd memorized every word. Tuition due in 3 weeks. Books another $300 minimum. The stack of medical bills sat on the counter like an accusation. Red stamps screamed final notice across every envelope. Elizabeth's fingers moved through them automatically. $8.47 short this month, even with the extra cleaning shifts. Mom's medication refill, $230. Marcus's textbooks, $300. Rent, $950, already 5 days late. Her calculator didn't need batteries anymore. She'd done this math so many times her brain had become the calculator. 4 more cleaning shifts this week meant 4 hours of sleep per night instead of 6. Her body would punish her, but bodies always did. That was their job. She caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror as she twisted her hair into the required bun. 28. But exhaustion had carved lines around her eyes that made her look 40. Her mother's illness had aged them both. Elizabeth's fingers moved to the small scar behind her left ear, an unconscious habit when anxiety spiked. The moment she touched it, vertigo hit. Quick, disorienting, like the world tilted 3 degrees sideways. Carnival music echoed somewhere she couldn't name. Water. Someone shouting. Gun. She blinked, stared at herself. What was that? But she didn't have time to figure it out. The bus left in 14 minutes, and being late meant losing the shift. Elizabeth grabbed her bag and left before the questions in her head could get any louder. The copper kettle sat on the corner of South Wacker Drive like a jewelry box in a construction zone. all gleaming brass fixtures and floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the dawn light and threw it across marble-top tables. At 6:30 a.m., the restaurant was already humming with preparation. Outside, the financial district was waking up. Mercedes and Teslas prowled past. Men and women in tailored coats that cost more than Elizabeth made in 3 months strode toward glass towers where they'd move money around and call it work. Elizabeth pushed through the staff entrance, tying her apron with a muscle memory of 6 years. "Your boyfriend's cheap Cancun trip sounds terrible, Jenna," she said as she passed the hostess stand. "Really rough." Jenna, 23 and blonde in that expensive way that came from salons, not boxes, didn't catch the sarcasm. "Right? I told him if he's taking me to Mexico, it better be Tulum, not some all-inclusive resort." Elizabeth made a sound that could have been agreement. In the kitchen, Miguel looked up from prep and whistled low. "You look like death, Liz." "I look like Tuesday." "That bad, huh?" She grabbed her order pad and forced a smile. Just another day in paradise. The dining room was starting to fill. Elizabeth knew them all by now, not their names, but their patterns. Table 3, junior analyst in an off-the-rack suit who tipped 12% and snapped his fingers for refills like she was a dog. Table 7, retired couple who smiled sweetly and left prayer cards instead of tips, as if Jesus paid rent. Table 9, a woman who ordered egg white omelets and sent them back twice before accepting them. And Table 12, the window seat, reserved for Alexander Hunt. 8 months of serving him had taught Elizabeth his pattern better than she knew her own. Arrival at 8:15 a.m., never earlier, never later. Black coffee, no cream, no sugar. Mediterranean omelet, no substitutions. Wall Street Journal folded precisely in half. Ice blue eyes that never looked up, never made contact, never saw her as anything more than a function. 20% tip, calculated to the penny. Gone by 8:47 a.m. She could set her watch by him. Had actually when her phone died last month. Elizabeth checked the reservation book. Table 12, 8:15 a.m., Alexander Hunt. Like clockwork, like gravity. Some things in the universe were reliable. She didn't know yet that today everything would break. Alexander Hunt walked through the door at 8:23 a.m., 8 minutes late. And Elizabeth felt it like a record scratch. Wrong. Something was wrong. He moved differently. Tension carved into his shoulders, pulling them tight. Phone pressed to his ear. His voice clipped and sharp in a way she'd never heard. The conversation sounded angry. His usual composed mask had cracked just enough to show something underneath. Stress, maybe fury. He sat at table 12, but didn't open his leather portfolio. Just stared out the window, jaw working. Elizabeth approached with the coffee pot, her hands trembling. She'd been awake 27 hours. The ER visit with her mother at midnight, false alarm, panic attack. But 4 hours in that fluorescent waiting room anyway. She'd come straight from the hospital to her morning shift because missing work meant missing pay, and missing pay meant Marcus's tuition stayed unpaid. Her fingers felt numb as she lifted the pot. "Coffee, Mr. Hunt?" He didn't respond. Still staring out the window. Phone dark in his hand now. She began to pour. The world moved in slow motion. The tremor started in her wrist. Exhaustion and adrenaline and 27 hours of consciousness conspiring against her. The coffee pot tilted too far. The stream of black liquid arced through the morning sunlight, beautiful and terrible, and hit his portfolio with a splash that made her heart stop. Papers scattered. Coffee soaked through his suit sleeve, the kind of suit that cost $3,000 minimum. The restaurant went silent. Jenna gasped at the hostess stand. Miguel's head appeared in the kitchen window. The manager's office door opened. I'm so sorry. Elizabeth's voice broke. Her brain was already calculating. Dry cleaning for a suit like that. $200? $300? Her entire paycheck wouldn't cover it. She'd be fired. Marcus's tuition payment was due Friday. They were already late on rent. Alexander Hunt looked up for the first time in 8 months. His eyes focused on her face. Not through her, not past her, at her. The look lasted 3 seconds. But Elizabeth felt every heartbeat. She watched something flicker across his expression. Recognition, shock, something that looked like grief, like he'd seen a ghost. "It's fine," he said quietly. Too quietly. Accidents happen. Those 3 words should have been relief, should have meant she'd keep her job. But his voice had a strange quality. Careful, controlled, like he was afraid of what might come out if he spoke too loudly. Elizabeth knelt to clean up, her hands shaking worse now. His portfolio had fallen open, papers scattered across the floor. She reached for them, trying not to read anything private. That's when she saw the photograph. Creased, worn, carried so long the edges had softened. A young woman, maybe 17, standing in front of a modest house. Mid-laugh, one hand shielding her eyes from the sun. Wearing a sundress, yellow, casual. The kind of unself-conscious happiness that came before life taught you to guard it. Elizabeth only glimpsed it for a second before Alexander's hand shot out, gathering the papers quickly, too quickly. But the image burned into her memory, because the woman in that photograph looked familiar, not like someone she knew, like looking into a mirror that showed a younger, happier version of herself, like looking at a stranger with her own face. Alexander stood abruptly. "Thank you, Elizabeth." He knew her name. When had she told him her name? He left a $100 bill on the table for a $15 breakfast and walked out without another word. Elizabeth stood holding the bill, heart hammering against her ribs. The feeling crawling up her spine wasn't relief. It was something darker, something that felt like being watched, like being hunted, like someone had just confirmed something they'd been looking for. Elizabeth pushed through the staff exit on Adams Street at 2:15 p.m., exhaustion pulling at her bones like gravity had doubled overnight. The afternoon sun felt too bright, too sharp. 3 blocks to the bus stop, 2 hours of sleep if she was lucky. Then her cleaning shift started at 6. She made half a block before she saw it. The black Mercedes, parked across the street, engine running. Tinted windows reflecting the afternoon light like mirrors, like eyes. Chicago was full of expensive cars. This meant nothing. Coincidence. Elizabeth kept walking, but her pace quickened. She checked over her shoulder once, casual, like she was looking for traffic. The Mercedes was still there, idling, not pulling out, not moving, just waiting. Her heart started to pound. She turned onto Wacker Drive, heading for the Blue Line station. Behind her, she heard an engine rev, softly. Didn't look back. Couldn't look back because if she did and the car was following her, then it was real. And if it was real, she had to deal with it. And she didn't have the energy to deal with anything except surviving the next 12 hours. The entrance to the Blue Line appeared like salvation. Elizabeth descended into the fluorescent-lit tunnel. The smell of brake dust and bodies and urban decay washing over her. The platform was crowded with afternoon commuters, office workers heading home early, students, tourists. She found a spot near the edge, checking her phone. Marcus had texted, "Mom's asking about bills again." What do I tell her? Elizabeth started typing a response when she felt it. That prickling awareness at the back of her neck, the animal instinct that humans pretended they'd lost but never did. Someone was watching her. She looked up slowly. Far end of the platform, partially hidden behind a support column. A tall figure in a long coat. Dark hair. Still a stone. Watching her. The train's brakes screamed as it pulled into the station. Doors hissed open. Elizabeth stepped on, heart hammering so loud she was sure everyone could hear it. She moved toward the window, looking back at the platform. The figure was gone. She scanned the crowd, but there were too many people, too many coats, too many faces. Maybe she'd imagine it. Maybe exhaustion was making her paranoid. Maybe the stress of the coffee incident and the strange photograph in Alexander Hunt, knowing her name, had twisted her perception until threats appeared where there were none. Elizabeth caught her reflection in the train window as it pulled away. For just a moment, less than a heartbeat, she saw the photographed woman's face superimposed over her own. Same features, same expression, like a ghost reaching through glass. She blinked and it was gone. But the chill that ran down her spine stayed with her all the way home. Alexander Hunt stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office on the 52nd floor of Meridian Industries headquarters, watching Chicago's skyline bleed from afternoon gold to evening purple. The office was minimalist by design, Scandinavian furniture that cost obscene amounts to look, deliberately simple, abstract art on the walls that he'd bought because galleries expected it but never looked at. Everything designed to project power and control. He felt neither right now. On his desk, the worn folder sat open like an accusation. Emily Hunt. Missing person case, hashtag 04-7821. 40 years old. Worth $2.3 billion on paper. Built Meridian Industries from near bankruptcy after his father's death, turning a failing real estate firm into one of Chicago's most powerful development companies. He lived alone in this penthouse, had never married, kept no close friends, and cultivated a reputation as brilliant, ruthless, and emotionally detached. All of it, every dollar, every connection, every calculated move, had been in service of one goal: finding his sister. Alexander returned to his desk, spreading the contents of the folder across the glass surface. 15 years of searching laid out in neat stacks. Original missing person report from July 4th, 2010. Age progression photos showing what 7-year-old Emily might look like at 10, at 15, at 20, at 28. Private investigator reports spanning years, each one ending the same way. No credible leads. Investigation ongoing. Hundreds of thousands of dollars spent. False alarms. Dead ends. Women who looked similar but weren't her. Hope dying slowly with each passing year until it became something harder and more obsessive. Not hope, but refusal. Refusal to accept that she was gone. Refusal to stop looking. Then 8 months ago, a private investigator named Torres had flagged something unusual. A woman working at the Copper Kettle, a mid-range restaurant 2 blocks from Alexander's office. Initial resemblance to the age progression images, but more than that, specific details that matched. Alexander pulled out the surveillance photos now. Elizabeth Bennett, captured over months, serving tables, laughing with coworkers, walking to the bus stop. The photos Torres had marked with yellow highlighter. Elizabeth bending to serve a table. Collar of her uniform shifting just enough to reveal a distinctive birthmark on her left collarbone. Emily had the same birthmark. Another photo. Elizabeth concentrating on writing an order, head tilted at a precise angle. Alexander compared it to old video footage of Emily. The same tilt, the same unconscious gesture. Security footage from a restaurant. Elizabeth sketching on a napkin during a slow shift. The sketch showed a customer's face, rendered with photographic accuracy. Emily had possessed the same unusual artistic skill, able to draw faces from memory with uncanny precision. Age appropriate. Emily would be 28 now. Elizabeth claimed to be 28. But the background check on Elizabeth Bennett was clean. Too clean. Birth certificate from Northwestern Memorial Hospital, March 15, 1998. School records dating back to age 8. Mother Linda Bennett, brother Marcus Bennett. No connection to the Hunt family. No indication of amnesia. No medical records suggesting identity confusion. Alexander had spent 8 months watching her, trying to reconcile the evidence with the impossibility. Then today, the coffee incident. When Elizabeth had looked up at him, panicked and apologetic, he'd seen it clearly. The exact expression Emily had worn the last time he'd seen her. Navy Pier, July 4th, 2010. The crowd pressing in during the fireworks. Emily's hand slipping from his. Her face turning back toward him, terrified. Mouth open in a scream. A woman in a red jacket pulling her away. Emily reaching for him. 7 years old. His baby sister. Gone in seconds. He'd replayed that moment 10,000 times. It lived in his nightmares. And today, for just 3 seconds, he'd seen it again in Elizabeth Bennett's face. Alexander picked up his phone, dialed his head of security. I need 24-hour surveillance on Elizabeth Bennett. Discreet. I want to know where she lives, who she sees, her daily routine, everything. Sir, we've already been monitoring. Closer. I want eyes on her apartment. I want to know who comes and goes. The woman she lives with, Linda Bennett. I want her background pulled again. Deeper this time. Something's wrong with the story. He hung up and returned to staring at the surveillance photo of Elizabeth. Picked up the photograph of Emily he'd carried for 15 years. Held them side by side. I'm going to find out who you really are, he whispered to Elizabeth's image. I'm going to bring you home, even if you don't remember me, even if you don't want to come. The flowers arrived during the lunch rush. Elizabeth was clearing table 9 when Miguel called from the kitchen. Liz, got a delivery for you. The arrangement was beautiful. Roses, lilies, orchids, the kind of expensive bouquet that cost $200 minimum. No card. Jenna cooed at the hostess stand. Secret admirer? Girl, who's your man? Elizabeth stared at the flowers like they might bite her. I don't have a man. Well, somebody's got their eye on you. The uncomfortable feeling in her stomach twisted tighter. She shoved the flowers into her locker and tried to forget about them. The manager called Elizabeth into his office before her shift started. Have you seen your personnel file? My what? Your file. With your hiring paperwork, emergency contacts, all that. It's missing from the cabinet. Thought maybe you'd borrowed it for some reason. Elizabeth shook her head. Why would I need my own file? He shrugged. Probably just got misplaced during reorganization. I'll turn up. But Elizabeth noticed he looked uncomfortable. And when she left his office, he was already on the phone. Elizabeth came home from her cleaning shift at 11 p.m., body screaming, eyes burning. As she approached her building, she saw it. The black Mercedes parked across the street. Same car from the blue line. Same tinted windows. She stood on the sidewalk, staring at it, waiting for it to move. It didn't. Inside the apartment, she went straight to the window, peeking through the curtain. The Mercedes was still there. She watched it for 15 minutes. No one got in or out. At midnight, she checked again. Still there. By morning, it was gone. The phone call came during the afternoon shift. Elizabeth answered, balancing an order pad. This is Elizabeth. Elizabeth Bennett? Male voice, professional and familiar. Yes. Just verifying your employment for a background check. Her stomach dropped. What background check? Who is this? Click. He'd hung up. Elizabeth stood holding the phone, heart pounding. Background check for what? She hadn't applied for anything. Hadn't given anyone permission to. Marcus came home from his grocery store shift, looking confused. Weird thing happened today. This guy came by asking questions about us. Elizabeth froze. What kind of questions? Said he was from the Census Bureau. Asked how long we'd lived here, where we moved from, stuff like that. I thought it was weird because isn't the census like every 10 years? We already did that. Elizabeth felt the walls closing in. Flowers. Missing files. Cars following her. Phone calls. Strangers asking questions. Someone was investigating her. Someone with resources. Someone who wanted to know everything about her life. And she was terrified. She already knew who. Saturday evening, 1 week after the coffee incident. The Copper Kettle was packed with the weekend dinner crowd. Couples celebrating anniversaries. Groups of friends. Business dinners that bled into personal territory after the third drink. Elizabeth moved through the chaos on autopilot, Exhaustion so deep that it stopped feeling like exhaustion and started feeling like her natural state. 8:45 p.m. Alexander Hunt walked through the door. Wrong. Everything about it was wrong. He was a breakfast regular. 8 months of serving him, and he'd never come for dinner. Not once. Elizabeth's hands went cold. Jenna seated him at table 12, his usual spot. But he didn't look at the menu. Just sat there, hands folded on the table, waiting. Waiting for her. Elizabeth considered refusing, asking Miguel to cover the table, claiming she was sick, running out the back door and never coming back. But rent was due. Marcus's tuition was due. Running solved nothing. She approached the table, order pad in hand, professional mask firmly in place. Good evening, Mr. Hunt. Can I start you with something to drink? Elizabeth. He used her name like they were familiar, like they were friends. I need to speak with you. It's important. Of course, sir. What can I get you? No. His eyes locked on hers, ice blue and intense. I need to speak with you privately, after your shift ends. Please. The fear crystallized in her chest. This was it. Whatever had been building for the past week, whatever he wanted, he was done pretending. I don't think that's appropriate, sir. I understand your hesitation, but I promise you I mean no harm. I have information about your past that you deserve to know. The restaurant noise faded. Elizabeth heard her heartbeat in her ears. My past, about who you really are. Her blood went cold. The sounds of the restaurant, laughter, conversation, clinking silverware, disappeared into static. She was aware of other diners looking over, sensing tension. I know who I am. Do you? He reached into his jacket and pulled out the photograph, slid it across the table. Emily Hunt at 17, standing in front of a house, mid-laugh, hand shielding her eyes. Elizabeth stared at it. The resemblance was undeniable now that she was looking properly. Same facial structure, same smile, same. The world tilted. Vertigo hit hard. A flash of something that wasn't quite memory. Sunlight, laughter. A man's voice calling a name that wasn't Elizabeth. A yellow dress, water. Carnival lights. Gone before she could grasp it. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, Elizabeth said, her voice shaking now. But I'm not interested. Please leave. Elizabeth. My name is Elizabeth Bennett. Each word came out hard, defensive. I'm 28 years old. I was born at Northwestern Memorial Hospital on March 15th, 1998. I've lived in Chicago my entire life. I know exactly who I am. She was trying to convince herself as much as him. Then why do you have nightmares about Navy Pier? Elizabeth's breath caught. She did have nightmares. Recurring fragments of carnival lights, water, someone shouting. But she'd never told anyone. How could he possibly? I've been watching you, Elizabeth. I'm sorry for that, but I had to be sure. Sure what? That you're my sister. His voice broke slightly on the word. That you're Emily Hunt. That you disappeared 15 years ago during a July 4th celebration at Navy Pier. And someone erased your identity and made you believe you're someone else. The restaurant spun. Elizabeth gripped the edge of a table. That's insane. Is it? When's the last time you saw a photograph of yourself before age 8? Do you remember your childhood before moving to Chicago? Do you have any extended family? Aunts, uncles, grandparents? Any friends from before age 8? Elizabeth opened her mouth to answer and realized she couldn't. There were no photographs, no memories, no extended family. Nothing before age 8 except the vague stories Linda had told her. Stories, not memories. Stories. I need you to leave, Elizabeth whispered. Right now. Alexander stood slowly, left the photograph on the table. When you're ready to know the truth, call me. He placed a business card beside the photograph. I'll be waiting. I've been waiting for 15 years. He walked out, leaving Elizabeth standing at table 12. staring at the face of a stranger who looked exactly like her. Elizabeth told her manager she was sick. Vomiting, she said, which wasn't entirely a lie. Her stomach was churning. She left through the staff exit at 9:30 p.m. and took the bus home in a daze. Alexander's words echoing in her skull. That you're my sister. That you disappeared 15 years ago. Insane. It was insane. The apartment was empty when she got home. Marcus at his night class. Linda working a rare overnight shift at the hospital where she volunteered. One of the few things that gave her purpose after beating cancer. Elizabeth sat on her mattress in the corner, phone shaking in her hands. She typed into Google, Emily Hunt missing Chicago 2010. The results flooded her screen. 7-year-old girl disappears from Navy Pier during July 4th celebration. FBI joins search for missing Chicago girl. Emily Hunt case goes cold after 6 months. 10 years later, no new leads in Emily Hunt disappearance. Elizabeth clicked on the first article. Read it. Then the second. Then the third. July 4th, 2010. Hunt family attending fireworks celebration at Navy Pier. Emily Hunt, age 7, wearing a yellow sundress, holding her older brother Alexander's hand. Crowd pressed too tight during the fireworks. Alexander lost his grip for seconds. Just seconds. When he looked down, Emily was gone. Massive search. Security footage showed Emily being led toward the parking garage by an unidentified woman in a red jacket. They got into a white sedan. License plate obscured. The woman was never identified. Emily was never found. There was a family photograph accompanying one article. Alexander Hunt, at 25, young and devastated. His parents. And Emily, 7 years old. Dark hair. Bright eyes, smiling at the camera like the world was safe. Elizabeth enlarged the photograph until Emily's face filled her screen. Then she opened her phone's camera, switched it to selfie mode, and held it beside the screen. The resemblance was impossible to deny. Same facial structure, same spacing between the eyes, same small bump on the bridge of the nose that she'd always thought made her look imperfect. But resemblance didn't mean anything. Lots of people looked similar. Elizabeth forced herself to think logically. Evidence for and against. Against. She had memories of childhood, vague, but present. Birth certificate existed. She'd seen it when applying for jobs. Linda confirmed her identity her entire life. School records from age 8 onward. For no memories before age 8. Not vague, completely absent. Recurring nightmares about Navy Pier. How had Alexander known? No photographs from before age 8. No extended family. No relatives. No one from the New Mexico period Linda always mentioned. Unexplainable dizzy spells when stressed. The scar behind her ear she couldn't remember getting. Her unusual ability to sketch faces from memory. Elizabeth's hands were shaking harder now. She pulled up the age progression images the investigators had created. What Emily might look like at 10, 15, 20, 28. The 28-year-old version could have been Elizabeth's twin. She fell asleep accidentally. Phone still clutched in her hand. Articles still glowing on the screen. The nightmare came. Same as always, but sharper now. More vivid. Carnival lights spinning. Bleeding colors across a dark sky. Calliope music, cheerful and sinister. Smell of popcorn and cotton candy and lake water. Small hand reaching up, trying to hold onto someone bigger. A man's voice shouting not Elizabeth, but Emily, running. Someone pulling her wrist, firm grip, woman's voice saying, "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm going to help you find your family." Red jacket. White car. Confusion. Fear. The woman's voice getting firmer. "Your name is Elizabeth now. Can you say that for me?" Elizabeth. Elizabeth woke, gasping. Tears streaming down her face. 3:47 a.m. She stared at the ceiling, heart hammering. If Alexander Hunt was right, then everything she knew about herself was a lie. Linda wasn't her mother. Marcus wasn't her brother. Elizabeth Bennett was a false identity built over a kidnapped child. And if Elizabeth Bennett didn't exist, then who the hell was she? Sunday morning, 7:30 a.m. Elizabeth waited until Marcus left for his grocery store shift before approaching Linda in the kitchen. Her mother moved slowly, as she always did now, post-chemo fatigue that never fully lifted, joints that ached on cold mornings, the weight of survival carved into her shoulders. "Mom, I need to ask you something." Linda's body language shifted immediately. Tension locked her shoulders. Her hands stilled on the coffee pot. Elizabeth noticed in a way she'd never noticed before, the instant defensive posture, the way Linda wouldn't meet her eyes. "What's wrong, honey? Tell me about when I was little, before we moved to Chicago." "You know the story, Elizabeth." Linda's voice was too practiced. "We lived in New Mexico. Your father worked construction. We moved when you were 7 because he got a job here, and then We're in New Mexico?" Linda hesitated, just a fraction of a second. But Elizabeth caught it. "Albuquerque." "What was our address?" "Elizabeth, why are you asking this? What was my school's name? Who were my friends? Why don't we have any photos?" Linda's eyes filled with tears, a weapon Elizabeth had seen before, but now she recognized as deflection. "Is this because of the bills? I know money's tight. I know you're working yourself to death for us. I'm so sorry, baby. If I could go back, if I could have beaten the cancer without the medical bills." "This isn't about money." Elizabeth's voice was steel. "This is about my childhood. I can't remember anything before we moved here. Nothing. Don't you think that's strange? You were young. Most people don't remember much before 7 or 8. I don't remember anything. And you never talk about it. We have no family. No one from your past, from Dad's past. No aunts, no uncles, no grandparents. No photos. Nothing." Linda sat heavily at the table, hands trembling. "Some things are better left in the past, Elizabeth." "What does that mean?" "It means I have protected you your entire life." Linda looked up, and for the first time, Elizabeth saw genuine fear in her eyes. "And if you're smart, you'll let me keep protecting you." "Protected me from what?" Linda's voice dropped to a whisper, from a truth. Monday morning, 9 a.m. The cafe Elizabeth chose was deliberately small, a cramped, independent place 2 blocks from the Copper Kettle with mismatched furniture, and a barista who didn't care about anyone's drama. Public enough to feel safe. Private enough to have the conversation that might destroy her life. Alexander Hunt arrived exactly on time, carrying a leather briefcase. He looked different in casual clothes, dark jeans, a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than her rent, but less intimidating than the tailored suits. More human. He sat across from her, setting the briefcase on the table between them like a barrier. "Everything I've learned is in here," he said quietly. "I want you to see it all. I won't hide anything from you." Elizabeth's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, organized with the precision of someone who'd lived with these documents for years. Original missing person file, yellowed at the edges. Emily Hunt's medical records. She flipped through them and stopped cold at the notation. Distinctive port wine birthmark, left collarbone, approximately 2 centimeters diameter. Elizabeth touched her own collarbone unconsciously, feeling the mark she'd always had. School records from Emily's kindergarten through 2nd grade. Report cards praising her artistic ability. A teacher's note: "Emily has an exceptional gift for drawing faces from memory." Family photos. A little girl with dark hair, laughing on a swing. The same girl blowing out candles at a birthday party. Emily and Alexander together, his arm around her shoulders, both grinning at the camera. Surveillance reports on Elizabeth, page after page documenting her life. Work schedules, bus routes, the apartment building, Marcus's college schedule. Elizabeth felt violated, exposed, reading about herself through a stranger's clinical observations. At the bottom, a recommendation form for DNA comparison testing. "Tell me what happened," Elizabeth said, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander's jaw tightened. July 4th, 2010. We went to Navy Pier for the fireworks, my parents, Emily, and me. Emily was wearing a yellow sundress. She'd been so excited all day. His voice caught. She was holding my hand. The crowd pressed in during the fireworks. Someone jostled us. I lost my grip for just seconds. When I looked down, she was gone. He described the frantic search. Police called within minutes. Security footage reviewed frame by frame. Witnesses interviewed. The footage showed Emily being led toward the parking garage by a woman in a red jacket. They'd gotten into a white sedan with the license plate obscured by a bag someone had strategically hung over it. Massive search operation. Media coverage for months. FBI involvement. Age progression photos circulated every year on the anniversary. No body. No ransom demand. Emily classified as endangered missing. The case went cold after 18 months. "I've never stopped looking," Alexander said. And Elizabeth heard 15 years of obsession in his voice. "Every resource I've built, every connection I've made, part of it has always been about finding her, finding you. But I'm not her," Elizabeth said desperately. "I have memories." "Do you? Or do you have stories you were told that became memories?" Elizabeth opened her mouth to argue and found she couldn't. When she tried to grasp specific moments from before age 8, actual images, not feelings, everything dissolved into fog. Sensations without context, emotions without events. "Take a DNA test," Alexander said, sliding a kit across the table. "If I'm wrong, I'll disappear from your life. I'll never contact you again. You'll never see me at the restaurant. I'll be gone. But if I'm right," his voice broke, "if I'm right, you deserve to know who you really are." Elizabeth stared at the kit. She should say no, should walk away. Her life was hard, but it was hers. Marcus needed her. Linda needed her. She knew who she was. But Linda's words echoed. "I've protected you your entire life." Protected her from what? From the truth? From a family that had searched for her for 15 years? From knowing she'd been stolen? And there was something else. Something she couldn't name. When Alexander had shown her the family photos, something inside her had resonated. Not memory. Something deeper, older. Like a tuning fork vibrating at a frequency she'd forgotten existed. "If I take this test and proves I'm not your sister, you'll leave me alone?" she asked. "Yes, completely." "And if it proves I am, what then?" Alexander's expression showed the first real vulnerability she'd seen in him. Raw hope mixed with terror. "Then I get my sister back, and you get your real life back. This is my real life. Is it?" He leaned forward. "Or is it the prison someone built for you?" Elizabeth took the DNA kit. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped it. Elizabeth went through the motions: morning shift at the restaurant, afternoon cleaning shift, coming home to the cramped apartment. But everything felt different, like someone had turned the contrast up on the world, and now she could see edges that had been blurred before. She found herself studying Linda's face during dinner, searching for signs of deception in the way her mother's eyes slid away from direct questions, looking at Marcus and wondering if he knew anything, if he'd ever suspected, if the life they'd built together was as much a lie for him as it was becoming for her. She hadn't told him about the DNA test. The kit sat hidden in her backpack for 3 days. She'd take it out, stare at it, tell herself she'd mail it tomorrow. Then tomorrow would come, and she'd push it deeper into the bag, terrified of what the answer might be. It happened during the lunch rush. Elizabeth was serving table 12. Alexander hadn't returned to the restaurant since their meeting. When the world tilted sideways, she was reaching for a water glass when it hit. A flash of memory, so vivid it felt like being physically transported. Small hands, her hands reaching up. A man lifting her onto his shoulders, strong and steady. The feeling of being safe, protected, higher than everything. Chicago's skyline spreading out before her, lights beginning to twinkle as dusk fell, his voice warm with affection. "Can you see the fireworks from up there, Emmy?" Emmy. Not Elizabeth. Emmy. The memory vanished as quickly as it came. The water glass slipped from Elizabeth's fingers and shattered against the floor, spraying glass and ice across the marble tiles. Miguel appeared from the kitchen. The manager rushed over. "Elizabeth, are you okay?" She wasn't okay, because if that was a memory, a real memory, then Emily Hunt wasn't just a DNA match. She was real. She'd existed. Elizabeth had been her. "I'm fine," she lied, kneeling to clean up the glass with shaking hands. "Just clumsy today." Elizabeth couldn't sleep. She lay on her mattress in the dark, phone glowing, reading everything she could find about the Emily Hunt case. Details accumulated like evidence in a trial. Emily Hunt had a scar behind her left ear from falling off a swing at age 5. Elizabeth touched her own scar, the one she'd had as long as she could remember. The one Linda said came from an accident when you were little. Emily could sketch faces from memory with photographic accuracy. Elizabeth thought about her own sketchbooks, filled with detailed portraits of customers, coworkers, strangers on the bus. Emily was terrified of carnival music after getting separated from her parents at a street fair when she was 4. Elizabeth remembered how calliope music made her nauseous, a visceral reaction she'd never understood. Emily had night terrors about drowning. Elizabeth's nightmares always involved water, dark water closing over her head, unable to breathe, hands reaching up toward light she couldn't reach. Coincidences piled on top of coincidences until they stopped being coincidences and became something else entirely. Marcus found her at 2 a.m., crying in the bathroom with her phone clutched in her hand. An article about Emily Hunt still glowing on the screen. "Liz, what the hell is going on?" He sat on the edge of the bathtub, worry etched into his young face. "You've been acting weird all week. You're barely eating. You won't talk to anyone. This isn't about money." She wanted to tell him, wanted to unload everything. The DNA test, the memories that might not be memories, the terrible possibility that everything they knew about each other was a lie. But how did you say that to someone who'd called you sister his entire life? "Just stressed," she tried. "Bullshit." Marcus rarely swore. "This has something to do with that guy, doesn't it? The one who came to the restaurant? The one who's been asking questions around the building." Elizabeth's head snapped up. "He's been asking questions? I saw him last week, talking to Mrs. Chun downstairs. I didn't say anything because I thought maybe you knew him." But Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Liz, what's happening?" She took a shaky breath. He thinks I might be someone else. Someone who went missing a long time ago." Marcus stared at her. "That's insane." "Is it?" Elizabeth's voice broke. "Do you remember me before I was 8? Do you have any actual memories of me as a baby, a toddler, anything from before?" Marcus opened his mouth to answer, then slowly closed it. His face went pale. I was only 2 when you were 8. I don't remember much from back then." "Exactly. And we have no family photos from before then. No extended family. No one from New Mexico where Mom says we lived. Nothing." "You think Mom?" Marcus couldn't finish the sentence. "I don't know what I think, but I took a DNA test, and I'm waiting for the results. And I'm terrified because if it comes back positive..." She looked at her brother, the person she'd raised, protected, sacrificed for. "If it comes back positive, then I don't know who I am anymore." Marcus reached over and took her hand. "You're my sister. That's who you are. I don't care what any test says." Elizabeth stood in front of the mailbox on the corner of Adams and Wacker for 15 minutes, the DNA kit in her hand. Mailing it felt like betrayal of Linda, of Marcus, of the life she'd built. But not mailing it felt like betrayal too, of herself, of the truth, of the little girl who disappeared 15 years ago and deserved to be found. She dropped it in the slot before she could change her mind, heard it hit the bottom of the box with a soft thud that sounded like a door closing. There was no taking it back now. Linda had always been anxious, the cancer, the medical bills, the constant financial pressure. But this was different. She'd become withdrawn, jumpy. She kept asking Elizabeth strange questions. Has anyone been bothering you at work? Have you made any new friends? Anyone asking questions about us? Why would anyone be asking questions? Elizabeth tested. Linda's hands trembled as she folded laundry. No reason. Just, you never know. People can be nosy. Elizabeth watched her mother. The woman who'd raised her, loved her, sacrificed for her, and saw fear carved into every line of her face. Linda knew something was happening. Maybe she'd been waiting for this moment for 15 years. Maybe she went to sleep every night wondering if this would be the day someone figured out. "Mom," Elizabeth said carefully, "if there was something you needed to tell me, something from the past, you know you could tell me, right?" Linda's face crumpled. "Oh, baby, some things are better left buried." "What things?" But Linda wouldn't answer, just shook her head and kept folding laundry with shaking hands. "Drop a comment right now. Would you want to know the truth if it meant losing everything you thought was real? Hit subscribe because this story is about to get so much darker." Day 11. Elizabeth was refilling salt shakers during the afternoon lull when her phone rang. Unknown number. Her heart stopped before she even answered. "Ms. Bennett? This is Dr. Sarah Chun from Mismatched Laboratories. Your DNA results are ready." The restaurant sounds faded to white noise. "And I can't discuss specific results over the phone. It's our policy. But Mr. Hunt requested we contact him when results were available. He's indicated he'd like to meet with you to review them together. If you're comfortable with that, just tell me." Elizabeth's voice came out as a whisper. "Please, I need to know." A long pause. Elizabeth could hear the doctor breathing, could hear papers rustling in the background, could hear the entire universe holding its breath. "The probability of a direct sibling relationship between you and Alexander Hunt is 99.97%. The phone slipped from Elizabeth's hand and clattered against the floor. The salt shaker fell, spraying salt across the marble table. Miguel called from the kitchen, but his voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. The manager appeared, his mouth moving, but Elizabeth couldn't hear words. Just ringing, just the sound of her entire world shattering. Everything she thought she knew about herself a lie. Linda wasn't her mother. Marcus wasn't her brother. Elizabeth Bennett was a construct, a fake identity built over a stolen child, like a mask made of someone else's skin. She was Emily Hunt. "Elizabeth, you need to sit down." But she was already moving, grabbing her bag, pushing past concerned coworkers, out the staff in trance into the cold November afternoon. She walked without seeing where she was going, her feet carrying her on autopilot. She ended up at Millennium Park, sat on a bench near the bean, staring at the distorted reflections in the sculpture's surface. This was where Linda's story said she found Elizabeth, a frightened little girl, confused and alone, unable to remember where she lived. Linda had taken her in, tried to find her family, but no one came forward. Eventually, Linda had decided to keep her, give her a home, love her. The story was a lie. Linda hadn't found a lost child. Linda had stolen a terrified 7-year-old from Navy Pier and systematically erased her identity, dyed her hair, cut it short, fed her new stories until the old ones faded. Created Elizabeth Bennett from the ashes of Emily Hunt. Elizabeth Emily, whoever she was, sat on that bench and cried. Not quiet tears, gasping, choking sobs that made passersby give her concerned looks, but not stop. This was Chicago. Everyone had problems. Who was she? She had 20 years of memories as Elizabeth Bennett. Those were real. The love she felt for Marcus, that was real. The care she'd given Linda, that was real. But it was all built on a foundation of lies, of theft, of a crime so profound she didn't have words for it. I'm sorry. Alexander's voice. He'd been waiting nearby. Of course he had. Probably had someone tracking her phone. He sat beside her on the bench, careful to leave space between them. I know this is... You don't know anything. Her voice came out raw, destroyed. You don't know what this feels like. To discover your entire life is fake. That you're fake. You're right. I don't. His voice was soft. But I know what it feels like to search for 15 years. To believe my sister was dead. To blame myself every single day for losing her. To wake up every morning and remember that I let go of her hand. Elizabeth looked at him. Truly looked at this stranger who was her brother. Saw the pain carved into his features like scars. The guilt he'd carried for 15 years. The desperate, terrified hope in his eyes. I don't remember you, she whispered. I know. I don't remember any of it. The family. The house. Navy Pier. Being Emily. It's all just gone. Someone took it from me, and I can't get it back. We'll figure it out, Alexander said. Together. You don't have to do this alone. Don't I? Because I don't know how to be Emily Hunt. I only know how to be Elizabeth Bennett. And now I can't even be her because she doesn't exist. She never existed. Alexander had no answer for this. They sat in silence as the Chicago skyline began to light up around them. The city indifferent to the destruction of one woman's entire identity. 3 days after the DNA results, Elizabeth returned to the apartment with 2 Chicago PD detectives, Alexander's lawyer and her brother, beside her. She'd insisted on being present when they arrested Linda. Needed to see it. Needed to hear Linda say it out loud. Linda opened the door and knew immediately. Her face crumpled like paper, aging 10 years in a single second. Lizzie, my name is Emily. The words felt foreign in her mouth. Wrong, but also necessary. Detective Morrison, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes, stepped forward. Linda Bennett, you're under arrest for kidnapping, child endangerment, and identity fraud. She read the Miranda rights while Detective Santos moved to handcuff Linda. Linda didn't resist, just kept staring at Elizabeth with desperate, drowning eyes. I need to explain. Please, baby, let me explain. Elizabeth wanted to refuse, wanted to walk away and let the justice system handle it. But she needed to understand why. Why her entire life had been stolen. They sat in the cramped apartment that had been Elizabeth's entire world. Her in one chair, Alexander standing behind her. The lawyers and detectives arranged around the room, like spectators at a trial. Linda sat at the kitchen table in handcuffs, shoulders hunched, tears already streaming down her face. Tell me, Elizabeth said. Her voice was cold. She barely recognized it. Linda took a shaking breath. 15 years ago, I lost my daughter. Margaret. She was 7 years old. Leukemia. She fought for 2 years, and then Linda's voice broke. She died, and my husband, he left during the treatment. Couldn't handle watching her suffer. So it was just me, alone, drowning in grief and medical debt and guilt. She described July 4th, 2010, standing at the edge of Navy Pier, literally standing at the railing, ready to throw herself into the lake. She'd written a suicide note, left it in her car. This was the end. Then a small girl appeared through the crowd, crying, terrified, yellow sundress, lost. You looked so much like Margaret, Linda whispered. Same age, same dark hair, same expression when you were scared. I comforted you, helped you look for your family. But the crowd was so thick, and you were panicking, and She closed her eyes. I saw a chance, a terrible, Selfish chance. I could save you, give you a home, and maybe you could save me from jumping. She led Emily to the parking garage, put her in the car, drove to Southside, kept her in the apartment for weeks while the media exploded with news about the missing Hunt girl. Linda had been gentle but firm, told Emily they'd find her family soon, meanwhile slowly changing her appearance. Dyed her hair from dark brown to black, cut it short, bought new clothes, and slowly, carefully introduced the new name. Some people call you Elizabeth. Isn't that pretty? Elizabeth. Can you say that? Elizabeth. You were so traumatized, Linda said, sobbing now. The separation. The fear, being taken by a stranger. Your mind, fragmented, started forgetting. I reinforced it, told you stories about New Mexico, about a father who'd left, about a life that never existed. And you believed me because children believe their parents. After a year, I enrolled you in school. By then you fully believed you were Elizabeth Bennett. Marcus, who'd been silent until now, spoke from the doorway. So we're not really. Linda looked at him, face devastated. You're siblings in every way that matters. You grew up together, loved each other. Family isn't just blood. Yes, it is. Elizabeth's voice cracked like a whip. Family is blood when you steal someone from their blood family. You didn't save me, Linda. You stole me. You stole 15 years of my real family searching for me. 15 years of my brother blaming himself for losing me. You stole my entire identity, my memories, my childhood. You broke something in me that can never be fixed. But I loved you, Linda whispered. Everything I did because I loved you. Love doesn't justify kidnapping. Love doesn't justify erasing a child's memory. Love doesn't make this okay. Elizabeth stood, her whole body shaking. You know what real love would have been? Taking me to the police that day. Letting me go home to my real family. But you didn't love me enough to do that. You loved yourself more. Marcus ran from the room. Elizabeth heard the front door slam. Detective Morrison moved forward. Time to go, Miss Bennett. As they led Linda away, she kept looking back, kept crying, kept whispering. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me, Elizabeth, Emily, please. Elizabeth said nothing. Watched the woman who'd raised her be taken away in handcuffs. Felt nothing. Felt everything. Felt like she was splitting in half. When the door closed, Alexander touched her shoulder gently. You okay? No. Elizabeth's voice was hollow. I'll never be okay again. Within 24 hours, the story exploded across every news platform in the country. Missing heiress found after 15 years, kidnapped as child, lived as working-class waitress. Billionaire CEO discovers missing sister working at restaurant he frequented for months. DNA test solves 15-year-old cold case. Emily Hunt alive. Identity erased by kidnapper. Elizabeth's life became a circus overnight. Reporters camped outside her apartment building with cameras and microphones, shouting questions whenever anyone entered or exited. Co-workers at the Copper Kettle sold stories to tabloids. She was always quiet, kept to herself. I knew something was off about her. Fellow cleaning crew members gave interviews about how Elizabeth had been secretive and withdrawn. Online, the conspiracy theories multiplied like bacteria. The Hunt family arranged this for publicity. Elizabeth Bennett is a con artist who studied the case. The DNA test was falsified. This is a publicity stunt for Meridian Industries. Think pieces flooded the internet. The psychology of stolen identity, class warfare. When a kidnapping victim doesn't want to be rich, the trauma of false memories. Alexander's security team moved Elizabeth into a hotel within 48 hours, an expensive suite at the peninsula that felt more like a prison than the cramped studio ever had. She couldn't go back to the apartment, couldn't go work, couldn't access her old life because her old life was now a crime scene, evidence in a kidnapping case. The social media explosion was overwhelming. Hashtags trended worldwide. Hashtag Emily Hunt. Hashtag Finding Emily. Hashtag Stolen Identity. Hashtag Where is Emily? People divided into camps. Team Linda. She was mentally ill and gave that girl a loving home when she would have died otherwise. Mental illness isn't a crime. Team Emily. Kidnapping is kidnapping, period. She stole a child and erased her identity. Mental illness doesn't excuse that. Team Conspiracy. The timeline doesn't add up. This is obviously fake. The Hunt family probably paid Elizabeth Bennett to pretend to be Emily for inheritance purposes. Elizabeth stopped reading after the first few days. Stopped looking at her phone. Stopped engaging with the world outside her hotel room. Alexander visited every day, bringing items packed from her apartment, clothes, her sketchbooks, Marcus's acceptance letter that she'd insisted on keeping. He tried to help, tried to bridge the gap between the sister he'd lost and the stranger she'd become. But Elizabeth could see the disappointment in his eyes when she didn't remember family stories, didn't recognize photo albums, didn't respond to childhood nicknames. Marcus texted her on day 5. I know you're not really my sister, but you're still my sister. Nothing changes that for me. I love you. Elizabeth read the message 17 times, crying each time, before she could type a response. I love you too. Always. Because that was true, wasn't it? Even if Linda wasn't her mother and Marcus wasn't her brother by blood, she'd loved them for 20 years. That love was real. The only real thing left in a life built on lies. 1 week after Linda's arrest, Alexander arranged dinner at the family estate in Winnetka. The house was massive, a sprawling Tudor with manicured grounds that probably required a full-time gardener. Elizabeth felt sick the entire drive there, Alexander's hired car feeling more like a hearse carrying her to her own funeral. Catherine Hunt waited at the door. She was 65, elegant in that way wealthy women achieved, perfectly styled silver hair, expensive but understated clothing, posture that spoke of decades of charity galas and country clubs. The moment she saw Elizabeth step out of the car, she froze. Emily. The name came out as a sob. Oh my God, Emily. She rushed forward, arms outstretched, and pulled Elizabeth into an embrace before Elizabeth could prepare herself. Catherine smelled like expensive perfume and desperation. She was crying, hands trembling as they gripped Elizabeth's shoulders. My baby girl. I thought I'd never see you again. Elizabeth stood rigid in the embrace, feeling nothing. This stranger's arms around her, this stranger crying into her shoulder, whispering about prayers answered and miracles, and thank God, thank God, thank God. When Catherine finally pulled back, Elizabeth saw the expectation in her eyes, waiting for Elizabeth to cry too, to embrace her back, to be the daughter she'd lost. It's good to meet you, Elizabeth said formally, and watched hope crack in Catherine's expression. Dinner was torture. The dining room table could seat 20. They sat at one end, Catherine at the head, Alexander on one side, Elizabeth on the other. Household staff served course after course on china that probably cost more than Elizabeth made in 6 months. Everything tasted like nothing. Catherine asked questions desperately. Do you remember anything? Your room? Your father? The trip to Navy Pier before? No, Elizabeth said after each question. I'm sorry. I don't remember any of it. With each no, Catherine's face fell further. She was trying to hide her disappointment, trying to be understanding, but failing completely. After dinner, Catherine insisted on showing Elizabeth her childhood bedroom. They climbed a curved staircase to the second floor, down a hallway lined with family portraits. Catherine opened a door at the end. The room was a shrine. Pink walls, stuffed animals arranged on shelves, a white canopy bed with princess sheets, photos of young Emily everywhere, on the walls, on the dresser, clustered on a bulletin board. Everything preserved exactly as it had been 15 years ago, a museum exhibit of a dead child. We never gave up hope, Catherine said, voice trembling. We kept everything exactly as you left it. Elizabeth stared at this monument to a girl she didn't remember being, felt the crushing weight of expectation. They wanted Emily back. They wanted their daughter, their sister, the girl who'd loved this room and these toys and this life. But that girl was gone. Only Elizabeth remained, a poor substitute wearing Emily's face. I have a plan, Catherine continued, words tumbling out faster now. You'll move back home, of course. We'll hire the best trauma therapists to help you recover your memories. I've already contacted Northwestern. They're willing to readmit you with full scholarship. You can finish your degree. You'll take your rightful place in the family, in the company eventually. We can fix this, Emily. We can make everything right again. Stop. Elizabeth's voice cut through the planning like a knife. Catherine froze. I appreciate what you're trying to do, Elizabeth said carefully. But I'm not a project to be fixed. I'm not a lost toy you can put back on the shelf and pretend 15 years didn't happen. I don't know who Emily Hunt is. I only know who Elizabeth Bennett is. But Elizabeth Bennett doesn't exist. She exists to me. The words came out louder than Elizabeth intended. She's the only person I know how to be. 20 years of memories, relationships, experiences. You can't just erase that. Catherine's face hardened, grief turning to something sharper. Linda Bennett stole you from us. She erased Emily. Don't let her win by clinging to the false identity she created. It's not a false identity. It's my life, my actual life that I lived. And you don't get to tell me it doesn't matter just because it wasn't the life you wanted for me. But we're your real family. You're strangers. The words came out brutal but true. I'm sorry, but you are. I've known you for 1 week. You can't force me to feel something I don't feel. You can't force me to remember something I don't remember. And you can't force me to be someone I'm not. Catherine left the room, her face crumpling. Elizabeth heard her crying in another room, heard Alexander's low voice trying to comfort her. Alexander returned alone. Give her time, he said quietly. This is hard for her too. She's been grieving for 15 years. She got her daughter back, only to discover her daughter doesn't remember being her daughter. And I've been Elizabeth Bennett for 20 years. Elizabeth shot back. Everyone wants me to just flip a switch and become someone else. The media wants a fairy tale ending. You want your sister back. Catherine wants her daughter back. But I can't be what you want. I don't know how. They stood in the doorway of Emily's preserved bedroom, looking at the shrine to a ghost. I should go, Elizabeth said. Alexander drove her back to the hotel in silence. When they arrived, he said, I'm not giving up on you, on us. Take all the time you need. But as Elizabeth rode the elevator to her suite, she wondered if there would ever be enough time to become the person everyone expected her to be. Comment below. Team Emily or Team Elizabeth? Who should she choose to be? Hit subscribe because what happens next will change everything. 3 weeks after the DNA results confirmed Elizabeth's identity, Alexander's legal team had turned their investigation from proving who she was to understanding how Linda Bennett had managed to keep her hidden for 15 years. Margaret Torres, the lead investigator who'd originally flagged Elizabeth 8 months ago, requested an urgent meeting. They gathered in Alexander's Meridian Industries office. Alexander, Elizabeth, the legal team, and Torres with her laptop open and documents spread across the conference table like evidence at a crime scene. Linda Bennett's story doesn't add up, Torres said, without preamble. She pulled up a map of Chicago on the screen. July 4th, 2010. Linda takes Emily from Navy Pier. Within 48 hours, the FBI had alerted every hospital, clinic, shelter, and school in a 100-mile radius. They had Emily's photo distributed to social workers, pediatricians, emergency rooms. Linda was a grieving woman with no money, no connections, struggling with suicidal ideation. How did she enroll a kidnapped child in school 3 years later without triggering a single alert? Elizabeth leaned forward. What are you saying? I'm saying someone helped her. Someone with resources and access. Torres clicked to another screen, a paper trail of documents. Look at this. Elizabeth Bennett's birth certificate. It's not a forgery. It's a legitimate document filed with Cook County. Someone with access to the system created it. Emily's medical records disappeared from her pediatrician's office computer system 2 weeks after the kidnapping. Professionally wiped, not just deleted. And when Linda enrolled Elizabeth in school at age 8, she had a complete paper trail. Birth certificate, immunization records, proof of residency. All real, all legitimate, all impossible for Linda Bennett to have created alone. Alexander's face had gone pale. Who? Torres pulled up a financial document. Follow the money. 6 months after Emily's disappearance, Linda Bennett, who was drowning in medical debt and hadn't worked in 2 years, suddenly paid off $47,000 in bills. Cash deposits, untraceable, then monthly deposits of $2,000 for the next 15 years. Always cash, always an amount small enough to avoid federal reporting requirements. Someone is paying her, Elizabeth whispered. Paying her to keep me hidden. Not just paying, protecting. Every time there was a renewed search for Emily anniversaries, age progression releases, media coverage, Linda would receive an additional payment and instructions on how to further obscure Elizabeth's identity. Change schools, move apartments, dye her hair darker. Torres clicked to a final document. Elizabeth watched her own life reduced to a financial transaction log. Every move, every change, every lie, funded and orchestrated by someone else. We traced the money back through shell companies and offshore accounts. It took 3 weeks and cost Alexander a fortune in forensic accountants. But we found the source. Torres looked at Alexander, sympathy in her eyes. I'm sorry. It's your uncle, Robert Hunt. The room went silent. That's impossible, Alexander said finally. Robert he helped search for Emily. He was at the press conferences. He offered a reward. Robert Hunt was CFO of Hunt Industries 15 years ago, Torres continued, pulling up corporate documents. And he was embezzling millions of dollars over several years. Your father was about to discover it. He'd ordered an external audit scheduled for July 2010. Then Emily disappeared. The audit was postponed. Your father fell apart. Your mother couldn't function. The company started hemorrhaging money. Robert positioned himself as the stable one, the one keeping things together. He took control of operations while your parents grieved. Elizabeth felt sick. Emily's kidnapping was convenient for him. More than convenient. Essential. If Emily had been found, your father would have returned his attention to the business. The audit would have happened. Robert would have gone to prison. Torres pulled up another document, a medical clinic intake form from August 2010. Linda Bennett brought Emily to a free clinic 6 weeks after the kidnapping. The child was traumatized, nonverbal, having night terrors. The clinic was run by a nonprofit. Guess who sat on the board? Robert Hunt, Alexander said, his voice hollow. One of the clinic's social workers flagged the case. A woman with a child who didn't match her story. A child who seemed confused about her own name. The social worker reported it to the board. Robert saw the opportunity. He approached Linda privately, told her he could make the legal problems disappear. Give her money to raise the child properly. Create a legitimate identity so Emily could have a normal life. All Linda had to do was keep Emily hidden and never, ever let her remember who she really was. Elizabeth stood abruptly, knocking her chair back. So, I wasn't just kidnapped by a mentally ill woman. I was sold, kept hidden deliberately, used as a distraction for corporate crimes. Linda Bennett didn't know, Torres said quickly. As far as she understood, Robert was helping out of compassion. He told her that returning Emily would be traumatic for the child, that Emily had bonded with her, that this was better for everyone. Linda believed she was protecting you by accepting his help. But he knew, Elizabeth said. He knew who I was. He knew my family was searching for me. He knew, and he paid Linda to keep me hidden so he could steal from my family. And now that you've been found, Torres continued, his 15-year-old crimes are at risk of exposure, which means he'll come after her, Alexander said. Torres nodded grimly. Already has. 3 incidents this week we've documented. A car following Elizabeth's security detail. An attempted breach of hotel security. Someone posing as room service. And someone offered a tabloid reporter $50,000 for proof that Elizabeth is a con artist running a DNA test scam. Elizabeth sank back into her chair. Her entire life. Not just stolen, but commodified. Used as a pawn in someone else's game of greed and power. Every year of poverty, every double shift, every sacrifice for Marcus's education. All of it could have been avoided if Robert Hunt hadn't valued money more than a child's life. What do we do? She asked. Torres and the legal team exchanged glances. That, Torres said carefully, is complicated. 1 week later, Robert Hunt requested a meeting with Elizabeth. The request came through his lawyer, formal, carefully worded. He wanted to apologize, the letter said, to make amends, to provide information about Emily's early childhood that might help her recovery. It's a trap, Alexander said flatly when Elizabeth showed him the request. They were in his office, Elizabeth pacing while Alexander read the letter for the 3rd time. He wants to assess how much you know, figure out how threatened he should be. Good. Elizabeth's voice was cold. Let him assess. I want to look him in the eye. I want to hear him try to justify what he did. Elizabeth. Emily. She corrected him sharply. If we're going to confront the man who kept Emily Hunt hidden, I should at least use her name. The meeting was arranged at a neutral law office in the Loop, third-party attorneys present, security outside, and recording equipment running. Robert Hunt arrived precisely on time, looking every bit the respectable businessman, tailored suit, silver hair, the kind of distinguished appearance that opened doors and deflected suspicion. He could have been anyone's kind uncle. That was what made it worse. Emily, he said warmly, extending his hand. I'm so sorry for what happened to you. If I had known what Linda Bennett was doing. You didn't know. Elizabeth didn't take his hand. You helped her do it. Robert's mask slipped for just a fraction of a second. A flicker of calculation in his eyes. Then the concerned uncle expression returned. That's a very serious accusation. Margaret Torres stepped forward, opening a folder. We have the financial records, Mr. Hunt. Cash payments to Linda Bennett trace back through 3 shell companies to accounts you control. We have the clinic intake form with your handwriting on it. We have emails between you and the social worker who flagged Emily's case. Emails you thought you'd deleted 15 years ago. Robert's lawyer started to object, but Robert waved him off. He studied Elizabeth for a long moment, then smiled slightly, not warmly, but with a kind of cold respect. Fine, he said, sitting down and crossing his legs casually. Yes, I helped Linda Bennett, but I saved that girl's life. Linda was suicidal. She was going to kill herself and probably take Emily with her. I gave them both a chance to live. I gave Linda the resources to provide a home for a traumatized child who would have ended up in foster care otherwise. You gave Linda the tools to erase a child's identity for your own financial gain, Elizabeth said. Prove it. Robert's voice hardened. Prove I did it for money and not compassion. Prove I knew Emily was the missing Hunt girl and not just a random child Linda found. You'll find I've been very careful. Nothing directly ties me to embezzlement or kidnapping. Linda will testify I helped out of kindness. She believes that herself. Without her cooperation, you have circumstantial evidence at best. We have the money trail, Torres began, which shows I helped a desperate woman and child. Charitable giving. No law against that. Robert leaned back, confident now. Here's what you actually have. A woman who kidnapped a child 15 years ago, and a man who unknowingly helped her because he felt sorry for her. That's the story a jury will hear. That's a story I'll tell. Alexander leaned forward, voice tight with rage. Are you threatening her? I'm stating facts. Robert turned to Elizabeth. Let's be honest, Emily. Or do you prefer Elizabeth? You don't even know who you are. The media is already questioning the DNA results. Conspiracy theorists think this is a con. By the time this goes to trial, if it goes to trial, no one will know what's real. DNA tests can be falsified. Memories are unreliable. You spent 20 years believing you were someone else. Maybe you still are. Elizabeth felt cold fury settle over her. You stole 15 years of my life. You used a 7-year-old child as a pawn in your corporate game. You let my family suffer. Let my brother blame himself. Let my mother grieve. All so you could steal money. And now you're going to walk away? Unless you can prove otherwise, yes. Robert stood, straightening his cuffs. I'm a respectable businessman with no criminal record. You're a confused young woman with a tragic past and questionable memories. Who do you think a jury will believe? He walked toward the door, paused. But I'll make you an offer. Drop this. Accept a settlement. Say $5 million. Live your life. Let the past stay buried. Because if you come after me, I'll destroy what's left of your credibility. The media will tear you apart. Every tabloid will run stories about the con artist Waitress who scammed a grieving billionaire. You'll spend years in court battles and end up with nothing except more trauma. He left before anyone could respond. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Torres spoke carefully. He's right about one thing. The criminal case is weak. Linda will protect him out of fear or misplaced loyalty. The evidence is circumstantial. A civil case could take years and cost millions with no guarantee of success. And the media attention would be brutal. Alexander turned to Elizabeth. We can fight this. I have the resources. We can. No. Elizabeth's voice was firm. I'm done being a victim. I'm done being a pawn in other people's games. I'm not going to spend years in court battles trying to prove who I am or get revenge on Robert Hunt. Then what? I'm going to reclaim my life, not as Emily Hunt, not as Elizabeth Bennett, as whoever I choose to be, on my own terms. And I'm going to make sure what happened to me never happens to anyone else. She looked at Alexander. Your uncle wins a battle, but we're going to win something more important. 2 months after the DNA results, Elizabeth called a meeting with Alexander and Catherine. They gathered in a private room at the Peninsula Hotel Neutral Ground, away from the Hunt estate and its weight of expectations. I've made some decisions, Elizabeth said, without preamble. About my life. About who I'm going to be. Catherine leaned forward, hopefully. Alexander waited, carefully neutral. I'm not moving back to Winnetka. I'm not joining the family business. I'm not becoming Emily Hunt full-time. She held up a hand as Catherine started to protest. But I'm also not pretending to be Elizabeth Bennett anymore. She doesn't exist. She never really did. Then, who? Catherine began. I'm going to be both, and neither. I'm going to finish my degree, social work, Northwestern, like Emily was studying before. But I'm doing it on my own terms, pay my own way. Emily, you don't have to. We have money, Catherine said. I know, but I need to do this myself. I need to prove to myself that I'm not just a victim of circumstances or a product of someone else's choices. I'm a person who can build her own life. Elizabeth's voice was firm. I spent 20 years thinking I was powerless. I need to feel powerful now. Alexander nodded slowly. What about the family? Your inheritance? Your place in? I'll figure that out eventually. But right now, I need space. I need to figure out who I am without everyone telling me who I should be, without reporters outside my door, without people expecting me to be the Emily you remember or rejecting the Elizabeth the first was. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. Can we at least stay in contact? Dinners once a week? I've missed so much of your life. I can't bear to miss more. Elizabeth softened slightly. Yes, once a week. Small steps. We build a relationship, not recreate one that doesn't exist anymore. Catherine nodded, wiping her eyes. There's something else, Elizabeth said. She pulled out a folder. Alexander, you mentioned starting a foundation for victims of parental abduction, identity theft, kids who age out of foster care. I want to do it. Alexander's face lit up. You're sure? I'm sure. I understand what they're going through better than anyone. I can help them navigate the trauma of not knowing who they are, of having their identity stolen or erased, of feeling caught between two lives. She opened the folder. I've already drafted a mission statement. The Emily Elizabeth Foundation, using both names, acknowledging both lives. Alexander took the folder, reading quickly. When he looked up, his eyes were bright. This is good, really good. I'll fund it, whatever you need. I'll run it, hands-on, not just a figurehead. I wouldn't expect anything less. Later that afternoon, Elizabeth met Marcus at a coffee shop in South Loop. The first time they'd seen each other since Linda's arrest. The awkwardness lasted exactly 30 seconds. You're still my sister, Marcus said firmly. Blood doesn't change that. You raised me, paid for my education, gave up your dreams for me. That's what makes family, not DNA. Elizabeth started crying. I don't deserve you. Yeah, you do. And I don't deserve you. But we've got each other anyway. He reached across the table and took her hand. Always. They hugged across the table, both crying now, and Elizabeth felt the first real comfort she'd experienced in months. This was real. This love was real. Everything else might be complicated and confusing, but this was solid ground. 2 weeks later, Elizabeth visited Linda in Cook County Jail. Linda had pleaded guilty to kidnapping and identity fraud, awaiting sentencing. They sat across from each other with a glass partition between them, phones pressed to their ears like the worst kind of intimacy. Linda looked older, grayer, smaller. 20 years of being someone's mother stripped away, leaving only a criminal in an orange jumpsuit. I know you can't forgive me, Linda said, before Elizabeth could speak. I don't expect you to, but I need you to know everything I did I thought I was helping. I was sick, broken. I made terrible choices, but my love for you was real. That was never fake. Elizabeth had practiced this conversation in her mind 100 times. Now, face to face, the words came out different than she'd planned. I know, she said quietly. That's what makes this so hard. You were my mom for 20 years. You loved me, cared for me, sacrificed for me. But you also stole me, lied to me, erased my identity. Both things are true. You saved me and destroyed me. I can't untangle those things. What happens now? I don't know. I'm going to live my life. Figure out who I am. Start a foundation to help people like me. Maybe someday I'll be able to forgive you, but not today. Maybe not ever. I'm learning that forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. Linda nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Elizabeth stood to leave, then paused. Marcus still visits you. I'm not going to ask him not to. You were his mother too. That was real for him, even if it was built on lies for me. Thank you, Linda whispered. Elizabeth hung up the phone and walked away. Didn't look back. Drop a heart in the comments if this story is hitting you emotionally. Subscribe. We're almost at the ending, and it's going to make everything worth it. For months after the DNA results, July 4th arrived with the same oppressive humidity Chicago always delivered in summer. Elizabeth woke in her new apartment, modest one-bedroom in Pilsen, paid for with money from her part-time job at a nonprofit and a loan from Alexander she was determined to repay, and knew what she had to do. She texted Alexander, "Going to Navy Pier today. Alone. Don't worry." His response came immediately. "I can come, just to be nearby. If you need, I need to do this alone. But thank you." Catherine texted next. Please be careful. Call me after? I will. Marcus, you got this, sis. Love you. Love you too. Elizabeth took the blue line to Navy Pier, the same route 7-year-old Emily had taken 15 years ago. The train was crowded with families heading to the July 4th celebration. Children in red, white, and blue. Parents carrying coolers and blankets. Everyone excited for fireworks and freedom. She emerged from the station into blazing sunlight and walked toward the pier. With each step, something shifted inside her. Deja vu so powerful it was almost painful. She'd been here. She knew this place, not from Linda stories or news articles, but from actual memory buried so deep had taken 15 years to surface. The entrance to Navy Pier loomed ahead. Elizabeth walked through it and stopped, overwhelmed. Memories crashed over her in fragments. Small hand in a larger hand, Alexander's, strong and safe. The smell of popcorn and cotton candy. Calliope music from a carousel. Her yellow sundress twirling as she spun. Alexander laughing. Careful, Emmy. You'll make yourself dizzy. Later, fireworks starting. The crowd pressing in. Panic rising. Someone jostling them. Alexander's hand slipping from hers. Looking up, seeing only legs and bodies. Screaming. Alex! Alex! A woman's face. Red jacket. Kind smile. It's okay, sweetie. Let's find your family. Come with me. Walking away from the crowd. Toward the parking garage. Confusion. But Alex is that way. The woman's hand tightening. We'll find him. Don't worry. The car. White. Clean. The woman's voice changing, getting firmer. Your name is Elizabeth. Can you say that? Elizabeth. Elizabeth stood in the entrance of Navy Pier, tears streaming down her face, as 15 years of buried trauma surfaced. She remembered, not everything, but enough. Enough to know Emily Hunt had been real, had been her. She walked to the spot near the Ferris wheel where it had happened. July 4th celebration in full swing. Families everywhere, children laughing. Vendors selling glow sticks and cotton candy. The same carnival atmosphere that had existed 15 years ago, indifferent to her trauma. Elizabeth stood in that exact spot and let herself feel it all. The terror, the confusion, the slow erosion of identity. The woman who'd taken her hadn't been cruel. That was what made it worse. Linda had been gentle, loving even, as she erased Emily and created Elizabeth. My name was Emily. Elizabeth whispered to the crowd that couldn't hear her. My name was Emily Hunt. I was 7 years old. I loved my brother. I was excited to see fireworks. I wore a yellow sundress. I existed. She walked to the edge of the pier, looking out over Lake Michigan. Water sparkled in summer sun, beautiful and indifferent. She pulled out a photograph, the age progression image of teenage Emily that Alexander had shown her months ago. She'd been carrying it ever since, like a talisman of who she was supposed to be. She didn't need it anymore. Elizabeth tore the photograph slowly, deliberately, let the pieces fall into the water, watching them float and sink. I forgive you, she said, not to Linda, not to Robert, to herself, for not remembering fast enough, for not being the Emily everyone wanted her to be, for choosing to move forward instead of backward, for building a life from broken pieces instead of waiting for someone to fix her. The wind off the lake picked up, carrying the last pieces of the photograph away. Elizabeth turned from the water, walked back through the crowds, past the carousel with its calliope music that no longer made her nauseous, past the Ferris wheel, past the spot where everything had changed. She didn't feel like Emily, didn't feel like Elizabeth. She felt free. That night, in her own apartment on her own terms, Elizabeth fell asleep without the usual anxiety about what dreams might come. The dream arrived gently this time, not like the nightmares that had plagued her for years. She was 7 years old again, standing at Navy Pier in her yellow sundress. But this time, She didn't lose Alexander's hand. The crowd didn't separate them. Instead, Alexander lifted her onto his shoulders the way the memory fragment had shown her. Can you see the fireworks from up there, Emmy? Yes, they're so pretty. The dream shifted like a montage. She aged. Teenage Emily in her Northwestern sweatshirt. Adult Emily in professional clothes. Alexander was always there. Catherine too. And their father, she'd never met him. But the dream gave him Alexander's kind eyes and a gentle voice. Marcus appeared too, and the dream logic didn't question it. They were all family, blood and choice and love woven together. Her father spoke. You did good, Emily. You survived. You chose life over victimhood. You chose growth over revenge. That's all that matters. But I don't remember everything. Memory isn't what makes you who you are. Choices make you who you are. And you've chosen strength, compassion, purpose. Dream Emily, the version of herself who'd never been kidnapped, appeared beside her. They looked at each other, mirror images. I'm sorry I couldn't be you, Elizabeth said. Dream Emily smiled. You don't need to be me. You're already who you're supposed to be. You're stronger than I ever would have been. They embraced. When Elizabeth pulled back, Dream Emily was gone. Only the real Emily, Elizabeth, whoever she was, remained. She woke to dawn light streaming through her window. Checked her phone. Alexander. Dinner this week? Catherine. Thinking of you. Marcus. Pizza tonight? She smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months, and responded to all of them. Yes. The Emily Elizabeth Foundation occupied a renovated building in South Loop, 3 stories of bright, welcoming space that felt nothing like the cold institutions most social services operated from. Sunlight flooded through large windows. Comfortable furniture invited people to stay, to talk, to heal. Art on the walls, some created by staff, some by clients, reminded everyone that beauty could emerge from trauma. Elizabeth Emily Hunt, she'd legally changed her name to incorporate both identities, stood in the main conference room, reviewing case files before the day's client meetings. Executive director. She'd finished her social work degree at Northwestern, working 2 jobs to pay her own tuition despite Alexander's repeated offers to help. The achievement felt sweeter for having earned it herself. The foundation served over 300 clients now, victims of parental abduction, identity theft, children aging out of foster care, anyone struggling with questions of who they were when their origins had been stolen or obscured. Elizabeth worked directly with clients, using her own experience to help them navigate the trauma of fractured identity. Marcus arrived with coffee, dropping one on her desk. Morning, sis. He'd graduated from community college and was now attending Northwestern on a scholarship Alexander had arranged. Studying psychology, working part-time at the foundation. Their relationship had grown stronger through the chaos, built on 20 years of real love that transcended DNA. You eat breakfast? Elizabeth asked automatically. Yes, Mom, he teased. The door opened and Catherine Hunt entered, elegant at 68, carrying boxes of donated supplies. She volunteered at the foundation 3 days a week, finding purpose in helping others the way she wished she could have helped Emily sooner. She and Elizabeth had built something real, not the mother-daughter relationship Catherine had dreamed of, but something authentic. Weekly dinners, phone calls, genuine affection earned through years of patient bridge building. Alexander arrived next, no longer CEO of Meridian Industries, but the foundation's primary benefactor and Elizabeth's rebuilt brother. They had coffee every Sunday morning, a ritual they'd established in year 2. He told her stories about young Emily. Some sparked memories, some didn't. She listened, grateful, even when she couldn't remember. Board meeting at 2, he reminded her. I know. Did you review the expansion proposal? Approved. We'll open the second location in 6 months. Linda had been released from prison 6 months ago after serving 3 years. Elizabeth hadn't contacted her. Wasn't ready. Maybe never would be. She'd learned that forgiveness didn't require reconciliation. Marcus visited Linda sometimes. Elizabeth didn't ask him not to. Linda had been his mother too, and that truth coexisted with all the other truths. Robert Hunt had paid $15 million in the civil settlement, a fraction of what he'd stolen, but enough. He'd avoided criminal charges, protected by expensive lawyers and decades of carefully covering his tracks. Elizabeth had made peace with imperfect justice. The money funded the foundation. She turned his crime into something good. At noon, Elizabeth left the foundation and walked 2 blocks to the Copper Kettle. The restaurant hadn't changed. Same brass fixtures, same marble tables, same floor-to-ceiling windows flooding the space with light. She sat at table 12 by the window. A new waitress, young, tired, working her way through school, approached. "What can I get you?" "Coffee and Mediterranean omelet, please." Elizabeth smiled, thinking about the symmetry. 3 years ago, she'd served this table. Now she sat here as a customer, a survivor, a person who'd rebuilt herself from broken pieces. While waiting for her food, she pulled out a napkin and began sketching, a habit that remained from both lives. The faces of clients she'd meet this afternoon, people whose identities had been stolen, whose childhoods had been disrupted, who didn't know who they were anymore. She'd help them figure it out, not by giving answers, but by showing them it was possible to build a life when everything you thought you knew turned out to be a lie. Elizabeth looked out the window at the Chicago morning. Executives rushing to work in tailored suits. Blue-collar workers heading to shifts in worn uniforms. Worlds collided just like hers had. The city indifferent to class, to pain, to the small miracles of survival happening every day. She thought, "I am Emily Hunt, who was kidnapped. I am Elizabeth Bennett, who survived. I am both. I am neither. I am whoever I choose to be." And that was enough. If this story moved you, drop a comment sharing what identity means to you. Subscribe for more stories that will make you question everything you think you know. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's possible to rebuild yourself from broken pieces. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning.